West Midlands and Leicestershire have said that they'll consider burqas and face veils as part of uniform for female Muslim officers. Meanwhile, former Government Minister Baroness Varsi says Islam should consider becoming more English in the design of mosques, for example. So, should society be more accommodating to Islamic culture, or should Muslims blend in more with UK traditions? Should Islam be more British? That's the question. We're joined now by Reverend George Hargreaves, who is a minister and a political campaigner, rejoined by Imam and broadcaster Ajmal Masroor. And from our Birmingham studio is a blogger on Islam and women, Shalina Litt. Welcome to you all. Ajmal, so do Muslims have an obligation, then, to integrate into the majority community?
Yes, they do, actually. Saying of the Prophet is that where you live, you must speak the language. You should adopt the cultures and customs of the local people. However, the fundamental features of your faith doesn't change. In your expressions of culture, in your food, in your dress, etc., you may adopt the local fashion and local customs. Muslims need to integrate in the sense of becoming more part and parcel of the society, be involved in activities, in social, in political, in economic, in welfare, in charity. And I believe Muslims, especially our generation of younger Muslims, are doing a lot more of this than the earlier generation. Now, and the second point about Islam's role in such a society is that we are not to be considered as an alien or an enemy within or the other. It can't be, because you can't function in a society if you're like that, if you're treated like that, and if you feel like this. And the final point is, integration is a two-way process. It's not a one-way system. We're not talking about assimilation where you lose everything. We're talking about integration. So if I meet your way, you should also meet my way. Look, there is an amazing integration already happening in Britain, and it's happened over the last 100 years. Bangladesh is where my parents come from. They came in this country in the early 40s and 50s. Within a matter of 50 years, they have taken over Britain with curry industry. That's a revolution of its own, but this is an integration of a good kind, as we say. Everyone welcomes it. Everyone wants to eat it. Integration is happening, of course, subtly. What we want to now see is more integration happening in institutional level, and demand for assimilation should reduce. Multiculturalism should be celebrated. Multi-faith culture should be celebrated. Our country is diverse. OK, George, do you think that Baroness Varsi is onto something here?
I think she really is onto something. And historically, with religions around the world, they have flourished when something that we call enculturation takes place.
Enculturation?
Yes, it's where a new religion will actually, as has been said here by the Imam, actually has assimilated into the community, not lost their faith, but have taken on songs, taken on music, taken on design of architect, on the host community. So they're not so other when the rest of the community see them operating. That's what we should welcome. So I welcome what Baroness has said, because that's the way to go. It works.
Frederick, choral singing, church-like architecture, would that make Islam seem more British?
I don't think so, no, frankly. I mean, if a minaret is a minaret, it probably doesn't have a place in English architecture, but then why should it? And I've got nothing against the mosque and the minaret, any more than I've got something against a synagogue.
But you don't need a minaret to worship Allah, do you?
Well, you don't need a dome or a minaret or a building to worship. You can worship God anywhere you like. But every community would build a space which is called the communal space for them to worship and express themselves. I think that's fantastic. You see, in a church, Frederick, we've got steeples.
Not today. Most churches
but even
today...
even if they don't, George, I don't have a problem with communities wanting to express themselves in the architecture of their choice. However, what we do... Now, hold on. What we do need to understand is that our architecture was influenced by many cultures of the world. We did not come out of the heavens fully formed in our architecture. It's called complete world's integration. So there is no monolithic culture in the world. Every culture is multicultural. To claim that there is one is in itself a fantasy.
I'm on your side here.
Oh, good. We agree.
Yeah, we do agree. I mean, I would like to see a multiplicity of different faiths. But I do think that the level of integration must come from within the faith. I mean, Jewry, for example, there are three brands, if you like. There's liberal, reform, and orthodox. The orthodox, obviously, are much more orthodox than the liberals. But I think people think sometimes, who are outside Islam, that Islam is just one monolith. It isn't. There are grades and communities within Islam, from Shia to Sunni, from very tolerant Muslims who wish to go to hardline who do not wish, under any circumstances, to have anything to do with non-believers.
Jermaine, I'd like everyone's view on the sofa. Thank you, Jermaine. Let's hear from... Absolutely.
Come on, the conversation.
A smaller group, should it be integrating more, or should the larger group be more accepting?
You know, I think there needs to be more integration from both sides. You know, Britain is probably the only country in the world that has our level of multiculturalism, where we're so... me personally, I think British culture is multiculturalism. We have the ability to accept people from different faiths, different walks of life, and say, you know what, you can be British too. You don't have to be English speaking, you can be from the Caribbean, you can be from parts of Africa, parts of Asia, gay, bisexual, no matter what, you are still British, and that's the great thing about it. Back to the question about the police officer wearing a burqa or a hijab, you know, I welcome it. Absolutely welcome it, and I love the idea, you know. People...
Would you welcome dreadlocks?
Absolutely, absolutely. What's wrong with dreadlocks? That's something.
Would you not?
I think that my brother was one of the first black policemen in this country. And so, right there in the 60s. The police are there as authority figures, and they are there to do a service to the country, to the public. That nobody asks anybody to become a police officer. And there are standards that are set, as in the military, that are useful for the job. And I think there comes a point as, how can it be useful to have your face covered from here to here?
What if you're reflecting the community you serve?
Absolutely.
Well, even with the niqab, let me ask you, your Imad, is that actually a part of the dress code that is compulsory in Islam?
I think we need to clarify. A woman should have a choice to decide.
But is it compulsory?
One second, George. A woman should have the right to choose what she wants to wear. In a multicultural society like Britain, we welcome the choice that people have. Now, if you ask a question whether does Islam require a woman to cover her face, a theological question, the theology says it's not a requirement, number one. However, if a woman chooses to, we should defend her right to do that. Number one. Number two, just to finish off, should a woman have to wear a burqa? Burqa is a very specific customary dress of a particular cultural communities coming from subcontinent. Is it a requirement? No, it's a cultural expression. In a multicultural society, which is pluralistic, which is tolerant and accepting, we will allow the space.
Ajmal,
we need to ask ourselves the right question.
I want to bring in Shalina Litt from our Birmingham studio now. I know you wanted to come in a little earlier. Please do. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, we have to be explicit about the identity that's been introduced. And it's a positive step forward that the police are considering extending the identity and the dress policy of women, because, of course, the whole drive was to bring on recruitment. So, of course, it's a bonus because now women who previously were covering their hair can now consider going into the police force. Another point that we have to be explicit on is covering the face. Is that practical? And I think the commissioner or the guy from the Muslim Association actually said it's not practical. And it's not, because we have to be clear that when someone is in a professional role and they're dealing with the public, seeing the face is important. So that's one matter. In terms of Islam being more British, I think Jermaine touched on it. You know, we have two different sets of values. You know, Islam is a way of life, so it has one set of values. And then so is being British. You know, some of them complement each other, some of them don't. But I think it's for the individual to find that balance. What we do need to make more room for is, in Muslims in Britain, learning how to be dealing with the British values that maybe coincide or contradict some of the Islamic values. For example, homosexuality. You know, if you speak about this in the Muslim community, it's like, shh, no, we're not allowed to talk about that. So, you know, I think they're two very different subjects in their right.
So what needs to change then, Charlotte? What needs to change in terms of to encourage more integration into British society?
The discussion. You know, I think even if we look at how Islam is presented in the media, there is so much on Islamophobia, on the negatives, but we don't often focus on the positives of Islam's integrating into the communities. You know, it's always very negative and one-sided. You know, I think even when you looked at the Brexit and you were saying the elderly felt misrepresented, you know, that's what's happened with Muslims and especially Muslim women. You know, there's a big rhetoric about how the Muslim woman is dressed. You know, a woman's Islam is not determined by her identity. There's so much more to Islam. It's about the 5 pillars. But there's this big thing about the way the woman is dressed. And it's unfair, really, because it's putting this big pressure on the woman on whether or not she should choose to wear a scarf. I think it's so positive that this
Is your view more that the majority should be more accepting of the minority, not that the minority should be making more effort to integrate?
I'm just saying, in the media, it's misrepresented. I think there's two dynamics happening. You know, there's the bigger discussion, like Jermaine says, in schools, things like that. We should be having political discussions and social discussions. But within Muslim communities, there should be different discussions happening there in terms of them integrating into community. So one's learning to accept the other kind of thing and learning to live with one another. You know, I think despite whether it's Islam, Christianity, you know, it's beautiful that Britain is accepting and tolerating and allowing us to exercise our values religiously. And that's what the positive thing is here.
George, brief reaction for you before we get some viewers' thoughts.
I think Frederick was correct in saying it must come from within. And with Baroness Farsi, it's coming from within. And we should celebrate the initiative that she is putting forward, that some expressions of Islam should take on some other forms of expression. I think, and that's why I'm here today. I want to celebrate and support. I'm not Islamic, I'm a Christian. But I think this is absolutely the thing to do.
Well, what are you going to do already?
OK, well, that's another discussion. Tommy, our viewers have been sending some thoughts in.
Yeah, and on the note of, you know, who should be accepting who, a lot of people saying that people who choose to live in Britain should adapt to British culture, but some people also saying it's up to Muslim people as to how British they want their faith to be. Tess says Islam is a religion that's founded in the Middle East and therefore will always have elements of that culture. Of course, Muslim people can be more British, but that's if they want to. Next message coming in from Martin says, it's not an English faith, never has been. You can't just take something and then completely change its foundation and reason for being. It makes zero sense. Nicholas says, this is the UK. It's not a Muslim country. It is them that should be adapting and integrating into our way of life. And Robert finally saying, Islam should be as British as the people who follow Islam wish it to be.
Oh, indeed. OK, Tommy, thanks. Ajmal.
I agree with the last statement, but Christianity was also founded in the Middle East.
Exactly.
Judaism was also founded in the Middle East.
Right.
Look, let's cut to the chase. Islam is about fairness and justice. It's about compassion and charity. It's about my interpersonal relationship. It's about loving my neighbours. It's about all of that, which is missing from our discourse. 5 pillars are personal practices. I don't need to display them in the
That's your brand.
No, but hang on, Frederick.
That is your brand. It's not ISIS brand.
That's what Can I ask you a question? ISIS or no ISIS, the good thing about Islam is there is a reference point called the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet. In the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet are very explicit about it. Your Islam is about justice. There is a verse that I was quoting yesterday. Be just. That is the closest you can ever be to godliness. It's not about prayer. It's about justice. It's about fairness.
The point of this discussion is about integration. Frederick, are we tolerant enough of other countries? Is Britain tolerant enough of other cultures?
For a long, long time sought to be tolerant in this country. I remember, and I'm the oldest person by far on this bench. Yes, I am. I'm
You're as old as you feel.
No. Just after the Second World War, I remember Jewish communities in London who had fled Hitler. They still spoke Yiddish, nobody complained. They still wore the skull cap, nobody complained. We never have complained about the way people dress. But I mean, what is bewildering, I think, to many people who are not Muslims is, for example, when a very kindly old shopkeeper in Glasgow had the nerve to wish his Christian customers a happy Easter, and another Muslim drove 200 miles to shove a knife in him and kill him. That because he, the shopkeeper, was of the Ahmadiyya sect, but the fundamentalist who thought that he had committed some kind of heresy and who knifed him to death for it and is now doing, I think, life in jail, was also a devout Muslim. Now,
one example
out of 3
million Muslims. One example out of 3 million Muslims in this country.
No, but you have schisms inside Islam.
So do everybody.
Everyone has schisms.
Every community.
But Protestants and Catholics stopped killing each other here a long time ago. You're still doing it in the Middle East.
Well, let's go
Quick word. I'm going to get...
OK,
gentlemen, enough. We're done. Shalina, thank you so much for your time as well. I think you figured out that's just about all from us today.
Peace.
Goodness. Many thanks to all of my panellists. Thank you very much.